What if? An apple and a knife. Part 2. Story by Ayed Hindi. Chapter 7. Past few days until the funeral of Mr. Roger was arranged, Simon was the only one who attended the dignified procession. He received the urn that contained the ashes after the end of the cremation, and he brought it back with him to the property and placed it over the fireplace next to Mr. Roger's picture. After a period of contemplation, Simon took a blade he found in one of the drawers, cleaned it with a spirit, went to the bathroom in front of the mirror, took off his shirt, and used the blade to open the wound where the chip was planted on his upper left shoulder. It was placed directly under the skin, so it was an easy job to remove it, clean the wound from any residuals, and patch it with a sticker. Then he wrapped the tiny chip with many folds of folio paper and placed it in the bin out of caution that there might be a secret mission to chase him. After all, he is a dangerous convict on the run. In the evening of that same day, Simon received a call from the charity that became the sole owner of the property, and they informed him that they intended to place the property on an auction in the upcoming days and that Simon must evict the property before the planned auction. He rejected the call and told them that he would stay at the property until the rights were transferred to the new owner. Seemingly, he had a plan, as the charity can't evict him without a court order or be considered a squatter, and this process can take a long time, which he needs to complete his next step before being exposed. Feeling anxious and worried, Simon decided not to extend his stay and to leave the property after collecting his documents and continue his escape elsewhere beyond this place. In the early morning, he took the bicycle, a rucksack and sunglasses and traveled to the nearest train station, miles away. He locked the bicycle on a rack outside the station, put on his cap and medical face mask, and went inside, purchasing him a ticket for a trip towards a city. When Simon reached his destination, he changed into a new jacket, cap, and face mask. He then boarded a bus outside the train station and traveled to the Crow and Coconut Caravan campsite. He hired a secluded caravan, tucked away among the trees with views onto the lake yards away from the veranda. Though, the camp had everything Simon ever needed and at the same time offers privacy. The campsite's mode was most relaxing, providing the restless fugitive with relative peace of mind. He could go fishing for pleasure, rent a boat, and spend hours exploring the lake while taking in the varied vistas of the natural world. He told himself that's the first time ever being alone in nature, but the foremost query on his mind was, how long will it last? And what's next? Chapter 8. At the police unit in the village where Simon was staying for a short period of time, a call from a nearby resident informed them that their stolen bicycle was found locked near the train station, and they wanted to retrieve it from there with permission from the police. The officer asked the caller if they had reported the theft, if they recognized the thief, and if they could prove the bicycle belonged to them. They answered back that they were busy reporting a petty theft, and the thief was dressed in prison uniform, a yellow and green coveralls suit, and they would bring the invoice for the bicycle purchase later at the police station. Nonetheless, the police waited until the owner of the bicycle arrived at the station and provided them with the invoice and a full report about the circumstances of the theft. After signing the declaration, the police gave them the permission to leave and recoup the bicycle. The description of the thief dressed in prison uniform caught the attention of Police Inspector Colin after receiving the report on the theft as part of his job monitoring crime rates in the region. The timing of the theft coincides with the jailbreak from the Luster Green Correctional Centre, though there is no report of a missing prisoner after the failed attempt, but he asked permission from his boss to contact the prison administration and inquire further on the case. Colin did query the prison if there was a missing prisoner in their custody, and after a long delay, they confirmed the absence of Simon from his cell, and he did not yet report back after the unfortunate jailbreak that happened a couple of weeks ago. Colin was gobsmacked and deeply shocked, resulting from the confirmation of his own suspicions, and he was stunned by the level of negligence and derelict of duty on the part of the prison. In their own explanation, the prison administration clarified that they were unable to inform earlier that Simon's absence was related to the confusion in the midst of the hostage crisis after the jailbreak, and after recounting the apprehended prisoners, the security went back to the scene where the prisoners worked remotely and they couldn't find him, and then they deployed their own specialists and inspectors equipped with drones to look for him and collect signals from the electronic chip that Simon was tagged with, but to no avail, and up until today, there is no trace of him anywhere nearby. They thought they would continue their extensive search for the missing prisoner without alarming the public and causing unnecessary panic among the population. Shortly after ending the acerbic conversation, Colin received all the available data the prison had on Simon, including his mugshot and DNA, and then he went on to the head of the constabulary and reported the incident and all surrounding circumstances. The instructions were to set up a task force headed by Colin and supported by other police departments, and their sole duty was to apprehend Simon as soon as possible without further delay. Returning back to his office, Colin met one of the officers who went to Mr. Rogers' house after learning of his death, and the officer confirmed that the person who was present when they're at the property and he claims to be Mr. Rogers' adopted son, looks the same as the pictures they received from the prison for the escaped prisoner, Simon, and also confirmed seeing a bicycle placed in the car garage. Chapter 9. It was an avalanche of criticism that headed for the police force and caused them massive embarrassment. They had encountered a dangerous fugitive criminal at their doorstep and did not apprehend him. They let him stay over 2 weeks without disruption or even an inquiry about his real identity and motives. The team commenced their duties by first contacting the coroner who wrote the death certificate of Mr. Roger and asking them if they were absolutely sure that Mr. Roger's death was natural and only due to his long-term ill health, as it was written in the report. The medical examiner assured them that they had done everything in the book and followed the right procedures and could not find anything else other than what already reported. Despite their assurances, the team decided to keep an open mind surrounding the death of Mr. Roger. After all, he was cremated, and there is no way to re-examine the body. They went down to inspect the property where Simon was illegally residing, and now he has already left, after obtaining a court order. Starting from the porch, they went on searching the property meticulously, lifting fingerprints and DNA traces from certain parts of the property. They listed all the items that were in the property, and they found out that the urn containing the ashes of Mr. Roger was missing among other unspecified items. Colin, the team leader, contacted the transport police and requested security camera footage from the train station in order to follow Simon's actions and whereabouts, if he ever boarded the train after securing the stolen bicycle outside the station, and his end destination. Using unique recognition software, they must examine all available footage from various train stops until they find a match with their target, Simon. The process was slow at first since they didn't have a clear picture of who they were looking for other than the photograph, which may be altered by wearing a mask, as they subsequently learned. Despite the fact that Simon boarded the train at a certain location and in the route he chose, there were numerous possible destinations because none of the passengers who left the following train stops matched Simon's outfit or posture, and that left Colin and his team scratching their head in wondering what next. At the end, the police needed a tip or a proper hint from members of the public, and they had to consult with the prison administration and other authorities before disclosing the relevant information to the general public and asking them for assistance. As more information came to light, the pursuit of the fugitive was followed with great vigor and determination. Orders were passed on to the border guards, among other agencies, on preventing any efforts to cross the border. That said, they were nowhere near their target and could not even tighten the noose around him. Chapter 10. While still on the run, Simon began working at Crow and Coconut Caravan Campsite, cleaning the boats and yachts at the lake harbor to pay for his rent and other expenses he might need. He adopted a false name and concealed his true identity to be able to get the job. The location is a hotspot and popular among tourists and attract many who come from all over the country to appreciate the natural landscape, magnificent views, and tranquil surroundings the area has to offer. The harbor offers sightseeing excursions, organized boat trips around the lake, venue for wedding, birthday party, and also fishing activities, which are always sought after and overbooked. Being a fugitive and a wanted man by the authorities, Simon was always careful not to mix among the crowd and decrease interaction with the individuals in order to keep his identity concealed. Nevertheless, he had to work with a crew of 3 every day, undertaking cleaning and upkeep of the boats and less often, going shopping or excursions into the city in the few months he spent in the campsite. One morning while working on Ros Lotta ship deck, Simon heard a voice chatting behind him on the wharf. He turned and saw through the rail's openings a young couple strolling alongside the venue manager as she was explaining the service they offer for their upcoming wedding and the number of guests the ship can accommodate for that promising Friday evening party. Simon recognized the demanding voice among the group. It was his ex-fiancée, Vera. They didn't see him as he was kneeling on the ship deck cleaning. His feelings suddenly were aroused in anger and contempt as the bare comparison of his state right now with her drove him mad, and he felt pity for himself. He told himself, "What a change of fortune. I just realized that now everything is upside down. She is worse than the scum, yet she is celebrating the good life." He began recalling sourly the time his relationship lasted with her. Not a single sweet moment he could remember, nor he could ever have sympathy for her. She neither called nor visited him during his time in detention before the final verdict. She had left him immediately after learning about the accident with no obvious reason or even regret for the sake of time they spent together. He was going through a very hard time after being implicated in murders he had never committed and being suspended from his work at the school, which left him financially in ruins. It was a very hard time to endure without any kind of support. Blinded by the feeling of utmost repugnance and the incessant desire of revenge from his ex-fiancée Vera, Simon begins setting up a plot to disrupt and ruin the planned wedding and the careful preparation to execute his plans, notwithstanding any remorse or compunction. Keeping in mind that he might need a new place to live after that wedding day, a new identity to go by, and a new job. Simon started checking the fine details of what to expect on that day, including which ship venue will host the party, how many guests will presumably attend, and what type of arrangement is needed for the party that is being scheduled. Chapter 11. The Ros Lotta yacht venue was being prepared for the big party. It's an oversized pleasure vessel consisting of 3 levels, well equipped and with a capacity of over 100 guests. The weather was clear and suited the awaited occasion, and the forecast would stay nice in the evening with mild wind. Extra light decorations were put on the deck, tables were decorated and set around all the levels, DJ equipment was brought on for live music to entertain the audience, and the yacht kitchen was filled with different types of food and sweets to cater for all the guests. The bar was ready with exclusive selections of cocktails, and upon the bride's request, a gas barbecue was brought as well. Later, the yacht crew prepared the firework for the ultimate party celebration. Throughout that day, Simon worked with the team, preparing and arranging the yacht, from last-minute cleaning to tables and chairs placement in the planned order of the ceremony. During his recess, he went back to the rental caravan, collected everything he owned, chocked it in his hired car, and thoroughly cleaned the place with bleach, leaving no trace of him whatsoever. In the evening of that Friday, the wedding guests began to arrive. Guided by the yacht crew, they were directed inside into the venue according the order of arrangement. On the other side, Simon sat on the beach, having his dinner and watching from distance. He told himself it's long waiting time till the fireworks set to start, but sadly, if everything goes as planned, I would have to leave this beautiful place for good. The yacht departed the marina and sailed onto the Boone Cove Lake, slowly cutting the rippling silver waves and escorted with loud music emitting from the DJ's speakers on board the vessel. Simon waited for hours until the ship crossed into the horizon. Away from sight, only spot of light was visible in the distance. Perhaps it was a long goodbye. The fireworks started and can be seen from that long distance. It was a beautiful scene at that time of sunset. Suddenly, a huge fireball can be seen on the horizon. Maybe everyone thought it was part of the firework, but Simon, having confirmed his plan, stood up and went to his car, started it, and moved on away from the campsite. While he was driving, he noticed a few ambulances going the other way. He had mixed feelings while driving towards his new arranged destination. At the time, he was torn between pleasure over achieving what was thought to be right and sadness over the loss of so many, including himself, and he kept asking questions. Was it all necessary? Is my own revenge fulfilled? But it was towards who? Would I deserve everything that happens to me? Are these the just deserts I yearn for? His mood turned later into rage, and he shouted, "What if? Remorse is for the weak and for the idiots," and he cursed everything under the sky. Chapter 12. A mass tragedy on the shores of Boone Cove Lake. That's the headline of the newspaper Colin was reading on Saturday morning following Friday disaster while having his tea, and as he continued to read the rest of the article, the emergency service was called on Friday evening after a loud bang and explosion wreaked havoc on the Ros Lotta pleasure yacht in the middle of the lake while the revelers were celebrating the wedding of a young couple, Vera and Anton. It was a disaster of large magnitude, and all emergency departments were deployed to help save and recover the victims of that accident. There were more than 100 guests and the ship crew on board the ill-fated ship. Something peculiar caught Colin's attention. It's the bride's name, Vera. He wondered, where and when did I come across this name in my investigations? At first, he couldn't remember exactly, but he continued reading the newspaper anyway. After a while, Colin went to the police station, turned on his computer, and started searching for the name in his files of previous and current cases that he had worked on, and the ones still an open case. Bingo, he found the name and more details about the bride in the Simon Open case. She was his fiancée for a long time until the apple and knife accident on the balcony when she decided to cut everything with Simon, according to her statement at the time when the police interviewed her. Colin, though, it could be a mere coincidence what happened to the unfortunate bride at her wedding party, but sometimes coincidences can be manufactured. He decided to ask permission from his superiors and join the Boone Cove Lake investigation, or at least have access to the information surrounding the fatal accident on the yacht. The police have sealed off the campsite, seized all the administration logbooks and registrations records, arrested the manager, and started interrogating all workers at the site. The public was forbidden from accessing the site, and at the same time, the police asked the people who were present in the marina at the time of the ship tragedy for information. Notwithstanding the fact that the investigation into the cause of the tragedy can take a long time to establish, Colin decided to help collecting statements from the workers at the site. In his mind, if there was any hint of foul play that caused the accident, then the culprit must have been at the site before and at the time of the accident. Counting down the remaining workers at the campsite, Colin asked if there were any missing employees, excluding the ship crew. The answer was yes, there is a missing cleaner, who has not yet returned to work here or reported back to the police. Though one of the cleaner co-workers stated that when we finished our work late Friday afternoon and we were about to leave, that person said he would join later the wedding party on the ship and work with the crew. We were surprised because he was a very reclusive individual, spoke to no one, had no friends, never went out with us or mixed with other people, and definitely never joined any party during his period of work at the campsite. Despite the possibility that the missing cleaner would have been on board the Ros Lotta yacht and joined the party, and most likely his body is now at the bottom of the lake waiting for recovery operations, Colin insisted on tracking down the missing cleaner, and the police went on to the rented caravan, which Simon was staying in for the time he worked at Crow and Coconut campsite, and they discovered that it was totally empty. They then sent the forensic team to collect any trace, data, or evidence from the caravan, but they failed to find any. It was very clean. Then the police started surveying all CCTV footage from the working cameras inside the campsite, and they managed to narrow down the individuals who left immediately after the accident in the lake. One specific car caught Colin's attention, and it was driven by an irritable individual who was impatient to leave the camp gates. Although it was dark at that time and discerning the driver was not possible, the police managed to identify the car registration number, and they found out that it was a rental car. After chasing down the car hire company that owns the car, a representative of the company informed the police that the car was hired for the day, Friday, that is, and later it was found burned on a side road in a remote area. The company initiated a compensating and criminal damage case against the driver, though the driver's data does not correspond to any individual living in this country, and subsequently the company could not proceed with the case. The police have now reached another cul-de-sac milestone. Chapter 13. The forensic team took a while to salvage the ship from the bottom of the lake and reconstruct the wreckage to examine the evidence or what is left of them, and later, study every possible cause of the fire on that forsaken ship to reach a conclusion. Under public pressure, the investigators of the disaster at Boone Cove Lake, after spending months of scrutiny, came up with initial inconclusive findings regarding the cause of the tragedy, and the blame went squarely on the head of the management company for allowing many hazardous articles on board the ship, such as firework and gas canisters for the barbecue, and they accused the company of negligence for not performing proper electrical inspection and ship maintenance. In spite of the fact that there was no evidence of foul play in the Roslotta yacht catastrophe, Colin was not fully convinced and still has deep suspicions surrounding the case, for he thinks there was a real motive behind that accident, and while Simon, the fugitive, remained on the run and had eluded the police force for so long, Colin could not rest his conscience and determined that he would finally catch Simon and extract admission from him. Although he told himself, "I could not pass judgment, I have a strong belief in my intuition." During a meeting of the police team assigned to pursue Simon, and while they were scratching their heads for an idea, one of Colin's colleagues suggested in a private meeting an idea that might work. He proposed to apprehend someone who resembled Simon physically and at the same age, preferably with amnesia or on drugs, a forlorn in an envelope nobody cares about, and we publish the news that we have finally caught the perpetrator of the crimes and the fugitive from justice. In this way, the public will be much calmer and respect us more. On the other hand, this news might encourage Simon to abandon cautiousness and leave his hiding, thinking he is safe now from our pursuit, and begin appearing in public more often, and that can lead us finally to him, as I hope. Colin thought for a second and asked, "What about DNA and fingerprints? How are we going to prove that this individual is Simon?" His co-worker answered that those things can be deleted, altered, or cross-contaminated until we have the right match. All that will be done is for the sake of the good. It was a reckless idea in a fleeting moment, born out of desperation and the destitute of means that is holding and preventing the best police force in the country from apprehending a dangerous felon on the run. However, Colin rejected the idea immediately without hesitation and told his colleague that we're not going down this unscrupulous path. Besides, Colin added, Simon has proven to be a smart and meticulous criminal, and he won't take the bait. That's if he's still alive. Chapter 14. Wish you all were here, among us, living your life to the fullest. Words uttered by Vera's parents during public funeral services organized for the victims of the Boone Cove Lake disaster caught Simon's ears while he was watching the ceremony on his TV, And he asked himself, why? And after a short silence, he said, well, less is more. Then he chuckled with laughter and switched off the TV. It's about time, he told himself after hearing the tea kettle whistle. He went into the kitchen for a pleasant breakfast while observing nature from the large window overlooking the forest before leaving home and heading to his daily work. Simon rented a tiny log cabin in the Covert Grove Candle Forest, where he was employed as a forest warden. There, he got paid well enough to cover all of his expenses and keep some for the rainy and dry days. He thought it's the best of all options at the moment available for him to have a place to live and earn money while at the same time being away from the public and the police. Every day he has a long walk around the forest for inspection, monitoring wildlife, any illegal camping, fly tipping, and to report back on his findings. He spent his days hearing the sounds of birds on the trees, the babble of the creek when he crossed the dells, the crackling of the leaves when he trod the path around the forest, and the whispering of the wind that moved through the tall grass and bushes. It is a mellow consonance of harmonical symphonies in the realm of beautiful nature. Rounding up his work for the day, he went along the dune and dust motorway that border the Covert Grove Candle Forest, inspecting for any unusual sightings along the boundaries. Simon found a pile of rubbish in one of the corners. The garbage was strewn along the metal barrier that separates the heavily trafficked road from the calm forest. Obviously, it had been catapulted across the fence. It can't be the work of a monkey for sure, with due respect to the monkeys because there are none around here in our forest. It might be in fact worse. It's the human achievement after all. More of them equal more rubbish. Simon started writing his report about the refuse he found, and then he took his camera and began photographing the items thrown around, tagging the photos with GPS so the rubbish collector could find them and remove them while trying to find the offenders who caused this damage to the forest. Among the rubbish, there were patches of bundled unsold newspaper that can cause fire in the area and beyond. Unforgivable crime. He said that while removing the piles of newspaper and securing them together in a safe spot, whereas he was busy organizing the sheets, a headline from a local newspaper, dated a day before today, grabbed his attention. Simon, the fugitive, has finally been caught. Simon continued reading the article. The police found the criminal following a tip from the concerned public on a hospital bed suffering dehydration and loss of memory after the fall of his bicycle and was lying on the side of a remote road until he was attended by the paramedics who brought him to the hospital. The medical staff are taking care of and looking after him while the police are waiting for Simon to recover from his injuries, and then they would be able to interrogate him, said Howard, the new head of the police investigation team. What kind of idiots do they think the people are? Who would believe them? Jerks. Wishing you no luck. Justice analphabetic is our worst enemy, Simon exclaimed, and he continued with his task of reorganizing everything and making the Covert Grove Candle Forest tidy again. The end. But never ends.